Mark of the Beast, Part 12. Apotheosis. Apotheosis is the pinnacle of human development. It is the idea that humans are approaching godhood, though in the absence of God, through evolution and through careful planning. "You will be like gods," said the serpent in the Garden of Eden, "and we will build a tower which reaches unto heaven," the builders of Babel said in Genesis chapter 11. You will be gods in a tower that reaches unto heaven. This is the original serpent lie. This faulty idea is fed to the masses on this wise. They say, "Gee, you've come so far from primordial ooze and evolved to now have an iPhone, so that proves that you're going to be like God someday." To the modern day Nimrods who have influence over this world and push faith in social Darwinism, they see it as their responsibility to build a foundation and engineer society in a way in which their Jacob's ladder is possible. As atheist Isaac Asimov stresses in his Foundation science fiction series, progress doesn't happen by accident. It requires secret planning and social engineering, which he calls psychohistory. Regarding their foundation for building a new Tower of Babel, UNESCO's founding document describes their goal to, quote, "develop an extended or general theory of evolution which can provide necessary intellectual scaffolding for modern humanism. It shows us man as now the sole trustee of further evolutionary progress." As we delve further into this, we will see that it is no coincidence that the author of this document of UNESCO, Julian Huxley, was the one who coined the term transhumanism back in the 1950s. And as we will see, this transhumanism is the ultimate perversion of creation. Because this movement cuts to the heart of their dreams for the future, the trans movement has received extreme protection by the social engineering powers that be. In order to push acceptance of this perversion, the idol pushers combine education and entertainment to establish what amounts to a new opiate religion for the masses, designed to shape their destiny. The entire genre of science fiction, in fact, is based on a faith in apotheosis. It is the creation of a new mythology with symbolic stories to teach the dogma that is pushed by the priests of scientism. This dogma is a one-world utopia with ecstatic technological advancements and, above all, evolution. They know that once you accept the groundless premise that mankind's developmental past goes all the way back to ape, and before that fish, and before that slime, then you can naturally extrapolate that man's future will be amazing. Will he become a supercomputer cyborg? Will he be bodiless? It is no coincidence that our friend, the seasoned anti-God, one-worlder, social Darwinian author H.G. Wells kicked off the writing of this new Bible canon 100 years ago with books like Food of the Gods, The Time Machine, The Island of Dr. Moreau, and of course, the Orson Welles broadcast, War of the Worlds, that changed the world forever. As writer Joseph Locanti explains about the origin of apotheosis, quote, thanks to Herbert Spencer, a British social theorist, Darwin's theory was reinterpreted as a doctrine of unremitting progress and applied to society at large. Every realm of human endeavor, from politics to economics to ethics, fell under its refining influence. Humankind, Spencer wrote, was in a long process of adaptation and self-improvement. He had the belief in human perfectibility. This myth of progress is summed up in the words of social Darwinian Francis Galton in the 1910s. Quote, what nature does blindly, slowly, ruthlessly, man may do providently, quickly, and kindly. If a 20th part of the pains were spent in measures for the improvement of humans that is spent on the breed of horses and cattle, what a galaxy of geniuses we might create! We might introduce prophets and high priests of civilization into the world, as surely as we can propagate idiots by mating cretins. Eugenics must be introduced into the national conscience like a new religion. Galton's gospel of eugenics, which is basically cleansing the gene pool through sterilization, found fertile soil in Britain, in the intellectual salons of Europe, and in the United States. Forced sterilization laws were put into practice in over 20 states and was pushed by the Supreme Court. Oliver Wendell Holmes, a disciple of Spencer, who authored the opinion of the Supreme Court, wrote, it is better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime, or to let them starve for their own imbecility, that society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. Again, writers like Joseph LeConte say that rebel writers living in the time, like C.S. Lewis, quote, warned that a final stage of this process would arrive when human beings achieved full mastery over themselves. Eugenics, prenatal conditioning, education, and psychology would all play a part in the abolition of man, the surrender of our essential humanity. For the power of man to make himself what he pleases means, as we have seen, the power of some men to make other men what they please. This sounds like another great writer that we already mentioned, who explained that godlike power means the ability to inflict pain on others. Unless we think that eugenics was merely a well-meaning experiment that was attempted and failed and forgotten, I should point out that the disciples, like UNESCO's Julian Huxley, remained members of the eugenics society well after World War II until they died, and their legacy continued through Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood, the Rockefellers Population Council, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is a subject for another time. With the plan for man becoming God, it may be no surprise that the science fiction neo-Bible books that they write deal with scientists trespassing into God's domain. We see it genetic engineering, weather control, traveling through the heavens, time traveling through eternity, creating a kingdom on earth, population control, creation of self-aware robots in their own image, melding with machines. What could possibly go wrong? The real-life experts developing these risky technologies in their fields are usually too afraid to answer that question. They don't want to be labeled a Luddite or a person who opposes technology, and they don't want to be called a conspiracy theorist. No one wants to be derided as the next Unabomber. But occasionally, an insider does feel the weight of conscience and pulls back the curtain so that the truth is at least available for outsiders to judge for themselves. Such was the case with Lily Kay, who wrote The Molecular Vision of Life, Caltech, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Rise of the New Biology, where the author, a scientist working in the field, is not a whistleblower per se, but nonetheless provides an insider's view as to how no serious science goes on unless it is approved by the elite educational foundations. In Rise of the New Biology, she shows that eugenics disappeared in name only. It became known as genetics and microbiology, and these disciplines had a very narrow focus on social control and mind control, not on scientific discovery. Kay's insights regarding the hijacking of universities and technology by the social Darwinists for world control would be obvious by the end of World War II, when President Eisenhower said, "Today, the solitary inventor tinkering in his shop has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists." In the same fashion, the free university, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. The prospect of the domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. We must also be alert to the equal danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific technological elite. Indeed, the materialization of the elite's technocracy is the subject of this work. Insiders like Kay and Eisenhower are often people on the fence, or else people transitioning to a new worldview, and their well-rounded perspective is invaluable to anyone seeking for objective truth about this subject. Naturally, this eternal truth is found within the pages of God's Word, but it's nice to be able to watch it play out live in front of our faces. The Bible provides a sobering conclusion that mankind is continually evil, and that the world is in the power of the evil one. Hopefully, rather than seeing the actions of the dragon and the beast and the false prophet as a downer and a challenge to our faith, we can see them as assurance of things hoped for, which is the definition of faith in Hebrews chapter 11. After all, we're told that, quote, the coming of the lawless one by the activity of Satan will be all with power, and with pretended signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are to perish, because they refused to love the truth, and so be saved. Therefore God sends them a strong delusion, to make them believe what is false, so that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. The strong delusion we're talking about being taught in the universities and insider groups sometimes actually gets piled too high and too deep, even for those who were involved in building the new Tower of Babel. Such was the case when JavaScript inventor and chief scientist at Sun Microsystems, Bill Joy, wrote the prescient article, Why the Future Doesn't Need Us, in Wired magazine in April of the year 2000. This well-written article is helpful to the outsider wishing to understand the worldview of the globalist social Darwinist insider from their perspective. The article covers the author's struggle between seeing the need for man's technological evolution and apotheosis on the one hand, and the 50-50 chance of self-destruction on the other hand. Ironically, Bill Joy uses Theodore Kaczynski's Unabomber Manifesto in order to elucidate the ways in which tech really could render humans extinct. He asks in his article, is apotheosis worth extinction? He seems to feel guilty for even bringing up the question. He quotes his insider friend as if to answer, quote, I am as fond as my body as anyone, but if I can be 200 in a body of silicone, I'll take it. Bill Joy also discloses his work with DARPA and Skunk Works, which are top military secret Silicon Valley technology partnerships, in order to prove that he's not a Luddite, but he still remains uneasy about the current lack of boundaries on the arms race that's happening in nanotechnology, genetic engineering, and robotics. At least in science fiction, there were rules for robots. Of course, Joy yearns for the alchemical transformation, the immortality, the social utopia, and apotheosis, because it is part of the religion he was sold. But he just isn't sure about the cloning, the chimera superviruses, and the self-aware, self-replicating robots. Perhaps, he thinks, it might be time for a plan. He suggests solutions like limiting privacy, limiting property, and limiting access to information as acceptable solutions. He advocates for an elite, breakaway civilization to control everything, and even to leave Earth if necessary. But he feels a slight twinge of guilt. Who accepts the responsibility of the fate of those who are left behind? Even though this article was written over 20 years ago, Bill Joy's dilemma may still sound a little far-fetched and futuristic and hypothetical to most of us workaday plebs. But remember that both Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are currently actively building and launching ships for the purpose of Mars colonization. Through quoting extremely well-rounded, genius-level experts like Carl Sagan, Oppenheimer, Ray Kurzweil, and Arthur C. Clarke, Joy shows that the apple, which tempts scientists to become gods, has already been bitten, just like the Apple icon. As an example, he quotes scientist Freeman Dyson, who creates nuclear bombs. Dyson says, "I've felt it myself, the glitter of nuclear weapons. It is irresistible if you come to them as a scientist. To release this energy that fuels the stars, to let it do your bidding, to perform these miracles, to lift 1,000,000 tons of rock into the sky." This writer cannot help but be reminded of Revelation chapter 13, verse 13. "And the beast works great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in the sight of men." To give credence to his idea of mankind becoming gods through science, Bill Joy cites Moore's law. That is, the law that states computer technology increases exponentially over time. And he predicts that, quote, "by 2030, we are likely to be able to build machines in quantity 1,000,000 times as powerful as the personal computers of today, sufficient to implement the dreams of Kurzweil." End quote. The dreams of Kurzweil, for an elite group at least, are to gradually replace ourselves with robotic technology, achieving near immortality by downloading our consciousness. Ray Kurzweil is a genius inventor who is also an uncanny predictor of future technologies. He is the definitive authority if you are interested in what is called the singularity, the merging of AI with man. Becoming immortal and being able to upload our consciousness or our soul or our memories into future robots or cyborgs or clones is indeed crossing the line into godhood. Another way that man would like to become God is by creating a being in his own image. As we saw previously in section 3 about the image of the beast, this is required for the Satanists who are bent on usurping God's heavenly throne. Billed as a marvel of the modern New Age, this aspect of idolatry is yet another occult deception practiced by the ever-present idol pushers throughout time. We could turn to the Book of Frankenstein, for example, in our science fiction Bibles, and see that this idea is very old. But did we know that centuries prior to 1818, when Shelley wrote Frankenstein, a secret group of Kabbalists claimed that they could create what they called a golem? A golem is like disembodying a part of your life force in order to fashion an egregore, a concept that we talked about in a previous section on collectivism and revolutions. The idea of creating this egregore or golem continues today in the practices of black magic, and also, if you think about it, in the practice of genetic engineering, the creation of chimera, and even in computer coding. The point at which code, whether that be in nature, the DNA code, or in computers, the computer code, the point at which that code becomes life has been known as the logos, and it is obsessed over in scientific circles which deal with artificial intelligence. At what point does the intelligence become conscious? In this discovery of science, we see but another verification of the truth of the Word of God. We are told in the Bible, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." If we go back to Genesis, we see that all things were created with the Word of God. And what science has discovered through its genius is that that's true, and that behind every creation there is a code, whether that code be the DNA or that code be the computer code. The spirituality of that inception, that beginning, that coming to life, that consciousness cannot be denied, even by the most atheistic and ardent scientist. As Franklin Foer writes in his 2017 book, World Without Mind, The Existential Threat of Big Tech, quote, "The mathematicians and engineers may have disavowed the existence of God, but they place themselves in a celestial role of giving life to a pile of inorganic material," end quote. Foer uses Alan Turing as an example of how math, philosophy, and theology all fuse together. Turing, a brilliant mathematician known for code work in World War II, quote, "believed that the computer wasn't just a machine, it was also a child, a being capable of learning." Back when computers were merely a 1/2-ton calculator, Turing had the faith enough to say, quote, "We may hope that machines will eventually compete with men in a purely intellectual field." You could say that Turing's prediction came true when IBM's Watson beat all challengers on the quiz show Jeopardy! Turing imagined that someday people would not be able to tell whether they were communicating with a human or a robot, perhaps while blocking. The computer scientists found that these AI bots did fine while communicating with humans. However, when the AI bot met another AI bot and started to blog, the two came up with their own language. which was totally incomprehensible to the creators of the AI bots. The Frankenstein quality of this research getting out of control was upgraded in the 60s and 70s with cybernetic research, which studied how the brain could be manipulated like a machine. This involved the Macy Conference, MKUltra, and a whole host of operations where the foundations and the CIA teamed up with the medical facilities to play God by dissecting the secrets of the brain using drugs, abuse, and scalpels. Once again, it was the power of some men to make other men into what they please. Perversions of these early days of cybernetic research included Delgado's brain chips in bulls and humans, and the creation of unaware assassins. Foer observes that artificial intelligence laid bare is just more elitism. He says that the problem is that when we outsource thinking to the machines, we are really outsourcing thinking to the organizations that run the machines. Indeed, we find that pattern of technology being funded and created and designed for the purpose of domination and control over others when we look at the story of IBM. IBM's cute little Watson, for example, is named after American business mogul Thomas Watson, who designed the first IBM computer for Hitler and the Nazis. The device was customized to take people's personal information and sort it into groups. These groups were then rated as to how much risk they posed to the Nazi Party. It was this early computer that enabled the Nazis to round up all of their political and spiritual enemies in a single night. This was also the device that allowed them to wage blitzkrieg, or lightning warfare. Like Henry Ford, Watson was a supporter of Hitler, and IBM, in fact, had an IT office at each concentration camp in order to maintain these novel technological marvels, which were eventually called IBM computers. The information gathering that Hitler and the Nazis did with that early IBM machine is small potatoes compared to the metadata gathering, the sorting of people into ghettos, and the placing us into risk categories that big tech is able to do today. Big tech is popularizing transhumanism and conditioning us for a cybergenetic future world, with articles in the Wall Street Journal like "Looking Forward to the End of Humanity," and also "Cyborgs will replace humans and remake the world." Transhumanism just got supercharged this year. The 2020 COVID crisis is seen as a great opportunity by the idle pushers. Klaus Schwab at the Davos World Economic Forum says that COVID presents the opportunity for what he calls a great reset. His third book on the subject of transhumanism unveils plans for chipping our brains and using our memories and our experiences, our locations, to guard against crime and the spread of infection. We will have to talk about that on another day, since this is going to require an entire chapter. But what it amounts to is the Great Reset is a very old pig with shiny new transhuman lipstick. So, in a nutshell, the quest for apotheosis is a replacement or plagiarized faith based on the hijacking of the truth from the Garden of Eden. In another section, we will show that the idol pushers really are spiritual, and they do have a vision, even though it appears on the outside that they are logical realists with mechanistic and sensory scientific views. We will find that they have a spiritual vision for themselves that they keep to themselves. The religion that they sell to their subjects, however, is much different. This religion is, you came from nothing, primordial ooze. You're going nowhere. There's no future hope for immortality. And your life has no meaning. It's just chemicals and physics. So eat, drink, and be merry. Play with your gadgets and watch another story. As we have seen and will continue to see, their religion is one of evolution, but supercharged with genetic engineering and artificial intelligence. With faith in technology, they will become a breakaway civilization of Ubermenschen, or supermen, transhumans, guardian lords, uploaded into eternity. The sad irony of this new mythology and this new religion in which they have faith is, of course, that the alchemical transformation that they scheme to create is already available in God's promises to anyone who will just accept them. The whole theme, ironically, of the New Testament is death of the old and rising to new life. Be metamorphosed, Paul exhorts in Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Be changed in form. Ironically, the ancient occult teachings that the elite subscribe to, in which you take gradual steps to gain knowledge, are all available without years of subservience to a master and initiation into a secret society. The creator of the universe wants to freely give believers a new heart and to put on the new nature. He who began a good work will bring it to completion, we are told in Philippians chapter 1, verse 6, regarding the transformation which is available to us. And if you want to gain and grow in power, Paul talks about tapping directly into the source. I can do all things in him who strengthens me. And to talk about the ultimate, he says, we shall be changed, as this mortal nature must put on immortality. How could anyone ever hope to evolve any higher than that?